Deep within the eastern mountains, a frustrated creature resided, a dragon. Surrounded by the shattered remains of gemstones it had painstakingly gathered, the dragon stared at the glittering debris scattered across the stone floor, its claws flexed uselessly. No matter how careful it tried to be, no matter how slowly it worked, the result was always the same: cracked, ruined, destroyed. The dragon released a long, heavy sigh. All it wanted was to get married, yet its hands were cursed, incapable of shaping anything delicate. And without gemstones, beautiful, flawless gemstones, it could never raise hatchlings. It knew that what it could produce would never be good enough. Every attempt ended the same way. The flaws were obvious, impossible to ignore. No female dragon would accept a mate who couldn't even provide something so basic. Its chest rose and fell as it sighed again, slower this time. If only things were like the old days. Back then, dragons didn't need skill. They simply raided human villages and took what they needed. Another gemstone crumbled in its grasp. The dragon snarled and cursed the Dragon King under its breath. Marrying a human had been bad enough, but imposing a law forbidding dragons from attacking humans had ruined everything. The old dragons were fine. They had stolen all they needed long ago. They were already set, but what about the young ones? The dragon stared at the ruined fragments scattered across the stone floor and asked the empty cavern the same question. A voice suddenly called out from the cavern, calmly agreeing. The old ones had it easy. A figure clad in armour stood before the dragon and spoke calmly, remarking that the older generation had made their fortunes early, playing the market, taking everything they needed, then turning around to look down on those who came after them. The dragon recoiled. A human. Here, how? It demanded to know how a human had entered its domain. What about the traps it had set throughout the mountain? The man in armour answered. He had disabled them so they could speak. Then he addressed the dragon directly, calling it Great Dragon. It was Lloyd. The dragon drew in a deep breath as Lloyd tried to speak. It didn't listen. Fire erupted from its mouth, a torrent flooding the cavern. As the flames surged forward, the dragon cursed Lloyd, blaming humans like him for everything. For the laws, for the restrictions, for the fact that it couldn't get married. The fire washed over Lloyd and Javier. Their armour held as they moved behind cover, waiting for the flames to subside. Javier glanced toward Lloyd and asked what the plan was. Lloyd paused. Then he said he didn't have one. He followed it by saying that all he needed to do was capture the dragon. Javier told him that was a goal, not a plan. He told Lloyd to be serious and asked again what the plan was. Lloyd answered immediately. Step 1, Javier fights the dragon. Step 2, Lloyd captures it. Then Lloyd pushed Javier out from cover, directly into the dragon's sight. The dragon lunged at Javier the moment it saw him. Lloyd stepped out from behind cover and called out, telling Javier he's got this. Javier let out a sigh and took his stance, facing the dragon head on. The dragon swung its claws at him, trying to crush him like a bug. Javier kept dodging, narrowly avoiding each strike as the claws slammed into the stone around him. The dragon grew increasingly angry as its attacks failed to land. As it lashed out again, Javier frowned. Something felt off. The dragon wasn't as strong as he had expected. Strong, yes, but not enough. He could probably defeat it. Nearby, Lloyd watched the fight unfold and grinned. He knew Javier could win. He had defeated the dragon in the book before, and now he was far stronger than he had been then. This was a young dragon. It didn't stand a chance. Javier launched himself upward, using controlled mana blasts to propel his body forward. The dragon recoiled in shock, wondering how a human could move like this. Lloyd already knew the answer. Javier had modified the technique used by the elves. He concluded that as the story's protagonist, Javier was a beast. Javier moved in for the attack, knowing that even if this dragon was young, it wouldn't be easy to hurt. He drew his sword. Aura gathered as he pulled in as much energy as he could, then he released it in an aura blast. The blast fired down at the dragon and hit it in the chest. The attack struck, and the dragon's eyes welled with tears. It rolled around, shouting that it stings. Javier told it to come at him, but the dragon didn't want to fight, trying to negotiate instead. Lloyd watched, smiling. Javier might look like a bug next to the dragon, but if a bug was attacking a human with a pointy object, it would be painful and annoying. Right now, Javier was that annoying bug. Javier continued the attack as the dragon grew increasingly afraid. Lloyd watched with a content smile. Everything was going according to plan. The dragon released a smoke screen and tried to escape. He shifted into a human form, then hid behind a rock within the smoke and waited, believing it was safe. He then attempted to teleport. Magical feedback surged through his body as the spell failed. The dragon collapsed to the ground as the backlash tore through him. Only then did he remember the anti-teleportation spell he had set up long ago. Lloyd approached and spoke again. He addressed him as the mighty dragon Solitas and introduced himself as Lloyd Frontera. Solitas tried to play dumb, claiming he wasn't a dragon and that he had simply gotten lost and wandered into the cave. Javier approached from behind and struck him with an aura blast. Solitas cried out in pain and demanded to know why they were doing this to him. Lloyd replied that no human would take so little damage from an attack like that and told Solitas to stop pretending. Then he smiled and said he had a very interesting proposition. Solitas replied that they could start by promising to stop poking him with aura blasts. Lloyd apologised and agreed. He said they had only been defending themselves since Solitas had tried to kill them. Solitas glanced at Javier, then asked what kind of proposition they had in mind. Lloyd grinned. Now he had him exactly where he wanted him. In the book, Solitas had attacked the elves outright. It had made one thing clear. When a dragon reached that state, there was no possibility of conversation. Lloyd had dealt with it the only way that worked. Fear. He had forced submission first. Now that Solitas had calmed down, Lloyd shifted tactics. A dragon's pride was just as important as its strength. Being beaten by a mere human would wound it deeply. Lloyd turned toward Javier and suddenly raised his voice, calling him an insolent punk. He demanded to know how he dared wave his sword at an almighty dragon. Javier's eyes widened in confusion. Lloyd continued, scolding him further. He said Javier was lucky the dragon before him was so gracious, merciful enough not to kill him on the spot. Then Lloyd ordered him to kneel, hands raised above his head as punishment. Javier hesitated, unsure of what was happening. Lloyd snapped again, asking if he was deaf, and repeated the command. After a moment, Javier knelt as instructed, clearly still confused. Lloyd then turned to Solitas and asked him to sit down and relax. He gave a respectful bow and asked if he could ask him something. Solitas, now calmer and with his ego soothed, agreed. Lloyd smiled and asked if Solitas planned to get married. Solitas recoiled in surprise and demanded to know how he knew that. Lloyd continued, saying that because of Solitas's clumsy hands, he had been having difficulties. Solitas grew visibly nervous and asked how Lloyd knew all of this. Lloyd answered simply. He said he would get Solitas married within 10 years. Solitas's face lit up, then asked if he was serious. A moment later, he caught himself and said he had questions. Lloyd ignored that and asked if the idea excited him. Solitas admitted that it did, but insisted his questions be answered first. Lloyd continued speaking anyway, describing romance and the future that awaited him. As he listened, Solitas began to flush, the image of a future wife taking shape in his mind. Lloyd produced a contract and said that if Solitas signed it, he would be on his way to a happy marriage. Excited, Solitas signed without another word. The moment Solitas signed, Lloyd's demeanour changed. He snatched the contract back and straightened. The warmth vanished. Coldly, Lloyd asked if there was a clause in the laws of dragons stating that any dragon who failed to honour a contract with a human would be met with the Dragon King's breath. Solitas looked up. Understanding settled in all at once. He had been tricked. As his gaze fixed on Lloyd, the realisation fully took hold. He had just signed a contract with the devil incarnate. Later, back at the Frontera estate, people working the fields noticed Lloyd as he arrived. Their reactions were muted. Some looked disappointed. After everything Lloyd had brought back recently, they had been hoping for something fantastical once again. They talked among themselves. One remarked that given Lloyd's track record, they had half expected him to show up with a dragon this time. Instead, all he had brought back was a singed young man. Another scoffed, saying a dragon would be ridiculous, and a few laughed at the idea. Lloyd grinned. He really had just recruited a dragon. No, a waste incinerator. Later, Lloyd took Solitas to Master Cordigus. He explained that Solitas was a dragon and outlined his situation. Then Lloyd told Solitas that, according to the contract, Cordigus would become his master. Solitas would serve as his apprentice and be taught how to craft jewels. In return, Solitas would head to the waste facility once per day and burn the sludge. Solitas detested the idea. A dragon cleaning human waste was humiliating. Lloyd told him he knew it must be hard for him. A dragon cleaning human waste was not exactly befitting of his race. Solitas looked at him in surprise and wondered if Lloyd could read minds. Lloyd told him that pride was important, but if he wanted to reach his goal of getting married, he needed to see this through. Then he asked which mattered more, his pride or getting married. Solitas's face twisted at the thought of being alone forever. He turned to Master Cordigus and said he looked forward to learning from him. Cordigus rubbed his chin, clearly amused by the situation. A dragon standing here, asking to become his apprentice. Solitas spoke again. Dragons might be the strongest beings in the world, but when it came to craftsmanship, Cordigus was the expert. He asked him to help fix his clumsy hands. Lloyd watched, smiling. Even a prideful dragon could understand the position he was in and swallow his pride. Cordigus said he couldn't refuse when it was put that way, but warned that he would be very strict. Solitas said he was ready. Cordigus shouted at him to stop standing there and go get the materials. Solitas recoiled in shock, then hurried out the door to fetch his gemstones. Watching on, Lloyd thought the contract was beneficial for both parties. In exchange for his pride, Solitas would receive the world's best education, and Master Cordigus would get the chance to have his first ever power trip on a dragon. Lloyd had experienced unfair contracts before. He knew what it felt like to be abused by a scummy boss. Still, a contract should benefit both sides as he watched Cordigus berate Solitas. As Lloyd slipped away with a handful of gems, the system alerted him that he had changed another fate for the better. Confused, Lloyd asked what it meant. The system explained that in the book, Solitas had lost his horns during the fight with Javier. Fatally wounded, he had returned to his cave and quietly died. Lloyd frowned. The book had never mentioned what happened to the dragon after the battle with Javier. The system also mentioned that without him, the Count and Countess would also have departed this world. It told him that his father was a talented man. Now he didn't have to worry about debt and could focus on things he had never been able to do before. He was now a happy man and a capable artist, and it was Lloyd he had to thank for that. Then it told him about Julian, his brother. Julian had been destined to die alone, far from home, but now he was being recognised as the school's brightest pupil. Again, Lloyd was the one to thank. The system told Lloyd that he had changed countless more lives. Lloyd looked pleased with himself. Lloyd then asked the system to pay him for his efforts, but the system told him to earn his own money. Lloyd asked for RP instead. The system questioned his sentiment. Lloyd told it that sentiment didn't put food on the table. Lloyd knew he needed more skills to help with the construction of the sewage system, especially his survey skill. Right now, he was limited to a small area, which was a problem as it slowed down the process of surveying the entire estate. Lloyd made his way to a ridge overlooking the land and spent his unused points to level up his skills. A moment later, a new skill unlocked: construction guidelines. Lloyd paused, unsure what that meant. The system explained. It asked if he was tired of handling all the important work himself. With this skill, the workload could be spread out. Lloyd thought it sounded like something a salesman would say. The system told him to try loading a saved 3D floor plan. Lloyd considered it briefly, then did as instructed. The hologram expanded and projected itself in front of him. A house rendered perfectly to scale. The system explained that it wasn't just for him. Other workers would be able to see the design as well, allowing them to follow the guidelines directly. Lloyd's mouth dropped. The usefulness was immediate. This alone would cut his workload by more than half. He needed to try it right away. Later, Lloyd brought Javier over and asked if he could see the glowing hologram embedded into the ground. Javier asked what it was. Lloyd told him it was a guideline for digging. Javier looked at him, unimpressed. Lloyd told him to just humour him for now. Javier dug where indicated, and Lloyd noticed the guideline extending deeper into the soil, exactly as he had expected. Lloyd then asked Javier to try digging outside the lines to see what would happen. Javier did as asked. A red warning light immediately began flashing, an alarm beeping as it did. Then a giant holographic head of Lloyd appeared, wearing an obnoxious expression as it scolded Javier for going outside the lines. Javier looked up, his face twisted in disgust as he remarked on what an eyesore it was. Lloyd told him that was his face, and that he was standing right there, saying Javier was being rude. Javier sighed and replied that with such an eyesore, no one would dare deviate from the guidelines. Lloyd told him he could stop with the insults now. Javier asked how Lloyd planned to explain this new power to everyone. Was he now a master of illusion, or had he stolen some artifact from a dark wizard? Lloyd paused. There was no point lying to Javier anymore. He asked which excuse sounded more plausible. Javier sighed and said they should go with the latter. Then he told Lloyd to find an old-looking necklace and wear it around the estate. Lloyd said it was a good idea. As Javier walked away, Lloyd told him he couldn't explain everything, then asked if there was anything he wanted to know. Javier said his curiosity wasn't important. He turned to Lloyd and said that what mattered was that Lloyd protected the people of the estate. Lloyd smiled. He told him of course he would, and quietly thanked Javier for believing in him. Later, Bayern informed the workers that construction on the sewer system would begin. He told them it would save many lives by preventing disease. He raised his voice and demanded to hear their motto. All the men lifted their shovels and shouted, "Safety first." Lloyd and Javier watched from the side. Lloyd asked Javier why the workers looked like they were losing their minds, wondering what had made them like that. The sewer system was designed so waste would be disposed of in catch basins placed around the estate. From there, it would flow through smaller pipes into the main sewer pipe, eventually leading into the central sewage tunnel. Padong could handle digging the smaller pipes, but the main sewage tunnel was too large for him. For that, Lloyd would need the cheer squad. Bibyong should be able to handle it without issue. As the workers began digging, Lloyd was able to use his guidelines for the first time. One worker accidentally dug outside the designated area, triggering the holographic head, which immediately scolded him. The other workers looked up at the hologram, staring at Lloyd's face twisted into that expression. Then they cheered, shouting that it was the angry face of Master Lloyd. After that, several workers deliberately dug outside the guidelines just to activate the obnoxious head again and again. Eventually, Lloyd scolded them, telling them to follow the guidelines properly. Once more, Lloyd turned to Javier and asked what was wrong with them. Spring arrived, bringing with it heavy rain. Even so, progress on the sewage system continued smoothly, thanks to the construction guidelines. Construction moved north as Lloyd told Bayern where the sewage management facility would be built. Bayern informed him that the area was where the stampeding mastodons had been relocated and asked whether it would be safe. Lloyd told him it should be fine now. Bibiong would keep them away from the area. He then told Bayern to inform everyone not to provoke the mastodons if they happened to see them. Even after construction began in the area, they didn't see a single mastodon. Lloyd wondered why, but the thought eventually left him. Later, Lloyd found himself killing time, playing red light, green light by himself. Pajong suddenly arrived, looking upset. He told Lloyd that he had found something strange while digging. Pajong led him to the area. A crowd had already gathered around the hole Podong had been working on. Lloyd stepped through them and moved closer. He looked down into the hole and saw a mastodon corpse. Lloyd climbed down to get a closer look. Studying the level of decomposition, he concluded that it hadn't been there long. Buried this deep underground, it couldn't have happened naturally. Someone had deliberately buried it. He wondered why. Bibiong spoke up, telling Lloyd that he could smell more beneath the ground. Lloyd ordered his men to dig around the corpse. They began digging, and one by one, more corpses were uncovered, buried together with the first. Lloyd frowned. Something was wrong. Nothing like this had happened in the book. The only similar event he could think of was the incident at the Namaran Wall, when Javier first learned to use his mana blast. Black magic had been involved there. Suddenly, the corpses began to glow. Lloyd realised what was about to happen. He shouted for everyone to get out of the hole immediately. It was corpse-exploding magic. The men barely made it out before a massive explosion erupted from the buried bodies. It didn't end there. A wall of flame surged toward the fleeing workers. Lloyd moved forward, placing himself between the fire and his men. He refused to lose anyone. He charged his mana blast, hoping the force would counter the oncoming flames. Then Bibiong leapt in front of him. The blast slammed into Bibiong's back as Lloyd shouted his name. Elsewhere, Solitus practiced his craft, carefully carving a piece of wood. Midway through he felt it, dark magic spreading through the distance. He recognised it immediately, exploding corpse magic. Solitus paused, wondering if that trickster was in trouble. For a moment he considered going to help. Then he noticed Javier sprinting toward Lloyd's position. With a monster like Javier heading there, Solitas concluded he wouldn't be needed. He returned to his carving. Back at Lloyd's position, he knelt beside Bibiong, begging him to wake up after taking the brunt of the blast. Suddenly the men recoiled, pointing ahead and asking what that was. Lloyd looked up and saw a herd of zombie mastodons approaching,